Well, some of you have been here for a couple of hours. Really appreciate your patience. We are delighted to be hosting Prime Minister Sharif. I think everybody in this room is well aware of the fact that Pakistan's success is the world's success, and the world's success is America's success. And we congratulate Pakistan on a peaceful transition of power, democratic elections. It was a remarkable showing of strength by your party, not expected, and quite a showing of strength. I'd like to recognize a few people who are here today. Where is Ike Khan? Ike Khan is a member of my board. Joe Eldridge, a member of the board. Kristen Lord, who is our Executive Vice President. Andrew Wilder, who is our Vice President for South and Central Asia. And where is Mueed Yusuf? Mueed is right here. Mueed Yusuf is our Pakistan director. It was a good team of people that brought this event together, and I thank them all for that. I think everybody in the room is pretty familiar with USIP, but we have others who are watching by television, and so I should simply say that the United States Institute of Peace has a mission globally of attempting to prevent, mitigate, and resolve violent conflict. That's really our focus. And we work very closely with the State Department, the Defense Department, USAID, other American USG entities, NGOs, and then foreign governments, foreign NGOs, parties all over the world to further that mission. Our most active programs actually are now in Iraq, Afghanistan, Pakistan, somewhat. Our South and Central Asia program is really quite large. Where Pakistan alone is concerned, we've convened roughly 80 meetings here at the United States Institute of Peace with experts from all over the world to talk about Pakistan and how to move Pakistan forward in a positive way, just in the last 3 years alone. We've done a lot of analytical work in Pakistan, looking at the things that sort of prompt violence and what might be done to lessen the likelihood of violence, build the capacity of civil society. We've done track 1.5, 2.0 dialogues, both at a community level and then between Pakistan and India, bringing groups together to talk about differences of opinion between those two countries. As everybody knows, we're very actively involved in the election process in Afghanistan. Stability for Afghanistan is critically important for stability in Pakistan. The last thing you need is a collapse and an ethnic tsunami arising from Afghanistan, because it won't be contained simply within Afghanistan's borders. The Prime Minister is in a difficult part of the world. He's got a very difficult job, and we really appreciate his being here. The event will involve remarks from the Prime Minister, and then we will ask Steve Hadley, who is also on my board, former National Security Advisor in the Bush administration, to come forward and sit with the Prime Minister and ask a few questions in a casual setting after the Prime Minister has finished with his remarks. When we are done, I would ask that everybody remain seated while the official party leaves. And I thank you for your patience already and hope that you enjoy this event. Mr. Prime Minister, could you come forward?
Congressman Jim Marshall, President, USIP, Mr. Stephen Hadley, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to speak at this prestigious forum on Pakistan's vision for regional peace and development. We appreciate USIP's noble mission of promoting peace and understanding among nations, and I deeply value your kind invitation. Ladies and gentlemen, I have come here as the elected leader of Pakistan, a land of ancient civilizations and rich cultural traditions, but a state still young and aspiring to be a modern, moderate, and progressive country of 180 million enterprising, hard-working people dreaming of a better tomorrow and a rapidly changing world. They also yearn for peace, security, and well-being that have eluded them for the past many decades. It is their hopes and aspirations that I have come here to voice before this learned gathering. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a momentous year in our history. Not only have we had a free, fair, and transparent general elections, but a peaceful, dignified transfer of power from one elected government to another. Also, an elected president succeeded another elected president in a graceful ceremony that the entire nation witnessed with a deep sense of satisfaction. These events would, of course, be of a routine nature to you, but for us, they represent a remarkable transformation of our democratic culture, signifying political maturity, not only for the electorate, but for the mainstream parties as well. They will surely strengthen the democratic institutions and the rule of law in Pakistan. Ladies and gentlemen, we view the mandate given to our party as a trust of the nation, which we shall endeavor to protect and promote in a manner that strengthens the democratic institutions and enhances the welfare of the people. This is a new and confident Pakistan, but I am not oblivious of the daunting challenges that we have inherited. My government is fully aware of the enormous economic and security challenges that face us today. We're also conscious that the people of Pakistan have high expectations from us. Given the fact that in our earlier aborted terms in office, we introduced many far-reaching reforms to liberalize the economy, strengthen the private sector, facilitate foreign investment, and create a business-friendly climate in the country. These enabled us to complete major infrastructure projects such as modern motorways, ports, and airports and dams. We intend to resume our journey where it was interrupted by the military coup in October 1999, both in terms of reforms at home and a new direction in our foreign policy. We want to create a society based on social justice and well-being of all our people without any discrimination. Ladies and gentlemen, we also recognize that the realization of this ambitious agenda requires internal peace and security, as well as peace and stability in the neighborhood, which is why we are determined to transform our relations with friends around the world, but more importantly, with our immediate neighbors. I am, however, aware that the greatest challenge to Pakistan comes from terrorism and extremism. But Pakistan is neither a source of nor the epicenter of terrorism, as is sometimes alleged. In fact, Pakistan itself has been a major victim of the scourge for over a decade. Pakistan's sacrifices in the struggle against terrorism and extremism are well known. We have faced hundreds of suicide attacks in the past decade, losing over 7,000 of our brave soldiers, security personnel, and policemen. While our civil casualties exceed 40,000 lives, our sacrifices are immeasurable, both in terms of the loss of human lives and the damage caused to our infrastructure. Excuse me. My government is firmly resolved to bring this cycle of bloodshed and violence to an end. But it cannot be done overnight, nor can it be done by unleashing senseless force against our citizens without first making every effort to bring the misguided and confused elements of the society back to the mainstream. We also have to ensure that the political parties and civil society are on the same page. The political parties and the civil society are on the same page so as to create the enabling environment necessary to tackle this menace. It was to this end that in an extraordinary expression of national unity and cohesion, the all parties conference underlined the imperative need of giving peace a chance. Ladies and gentlemen, my government is also determined to address the challenge posed by a weak economy, while recognizing the urgency of focusing on the energy sector, which has hampered our national growth and created huge social unrest. Major reforms have already been introduced to ensure sound macroeconomic policies, to reduce budgetary deficits, ensure balance of payment, curb inflationary pressure, and reduce the country's dependence on foreign loans and assistance. We are also engaged in efforts to bring 500,000 new taxpayers into the tax net. These measures should enhance the tax to GDP ratio from the current low of 9% to 15% by 2018. It has also been decided to privatize the major state-owned enterprises, including entities such as the national airlines, the steel mills, and the national oil and gas companies. Turning to foreign relations, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to state that we firmly believe that a peaceful, stable, and united Afghanistan is in Pakistan's vital interest. Our efforts are, therefore, focused on helping the stabilization of Afghanistan, which is growing through a vitally important phase with security and political transition underway. Pakistan wishes these landmark transitions to be completed peacefully and smoothly. We also wish the international community to remain engaged in supporting Afghanistan's reconstruction and economic development. We hope for an Afghanistan that is firmly on the path of stability and prosperity. As an essential element of our policy, we strongly support an inclusive, Afghan-led and Afghan-owned peace and reconciliation process. During President Karzai's recent visit to Pakistan, we reaffirmed our solidarity with Afghanistan and its people. I also assured President Karzai that we wish neither to interfere in Afghanistan's internal affairs, nor do we have any favorites in Afghanistan. In fact, it is our earnest hope to see the Afghans themselves unite for peace, prosperity, and development of their country. Simultaneously, we are making efforts to upgrade our bilateral relations with Afghanistan in all spheres. My own vision is, ladies and gentlemen, it should be defined by a strong trade and economic partnership. In addition to hosting millions of Afghan refugees for decades, Pakistan is extending assistance with more than $450 million for Afghanistan's reconstruction and capacity building, with special focus on infrastructure, health, and education sectors. We've also decided to extend the Karachi-Peshawar highway up to Kabul. This is our modest contribution to bringing Afghanistan into the regional economic hub. We believe that we can work with Afghanistan for enhanced regional and economic cooperation that would establish and reinforce regional trade, energy, and communication corridors. The two corridors are participating in mega energy projects, namely Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, and Central Asia, South Asia Electricity Transmission and Trade Project called CASA 1000. This would undoubtedly help strengthen efforts for peace and stability and advance our common objectives of progress and prosperity. Ladies and gentlemen, our other important neighbor is India, with which we share a common history as well as common destiny. Our past and our future are intertwined. Pakistan is happy to see the people of India live in peace and security. The people of Pakistan want to resolve all outstanding issues with India through dialogue and negotiations. We are confident that there are areas where we can make quick progress. We also wish to put ourselves on the path for normalizing trade relations with India. My meeting with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh last month in New York reflected this desire, and I am confident that we can overcome challenges and find solutions to all issues as long as we stay engaged. In any case, we do not want isolated incidents to interrupt our dialogue. Our message is simple. Future prosperity and economic development in South Asia depends on peace and security in the region. Therefore, all of us have a stake in working for these noble objectives, for our own sake as well as for the sake of our future generations. It is about time that the two sides address their bilateral issues with utmost seriousness in order to avail themselves of the historic opportunity of devoting their energies and resources to development and betterment of their teeming millions. May I add here, ladies and gentlemen, that had our two countries not wasted their precious resources in a never-ending arms race, we would not only have avoided the futile conflicts, but also emerged as stable and prosperous nations. I wish to assure this august audience that Pakistan desires to live in peace with its neighbor. We would not be found wanting in walking the extra mile. Our dream is to realize the potential of mutually beneficial economic cooperation at the bilateral level as well as the broader regional level under SAARC. Even more promising are the prospects of inter-regional cooperation. As a populous, energy deficit, but technologically advanced, fast-growing region, South Asia stands to benefit tremendously from the energy-rich Central Asia and West Asia. There is a huge potential for inter-regional trade, transit, and connectivity. Pakistan provides Central Asia with the shortest access to the warm waters of the Arabian Sea. Ladies and gentlemen, contrary to the common perception, Pakistan-United States relations have stood the test of time. Despite the occasional hiccups, the solid foundation of this vital relationship have always weathered the occasional storm and turbulence. As democracy takes roots in Pakistan, there is scope for building a strong and stable partnership between the two countries. They should be based on mutual interest and mutual respect, as so clearly articulated by President Obama in his Cairo speech. Our two countries share perceptions and interests on a wide range of issues. These include Afghanistan, peace and stability in South Asia and in the Middle East, as well as extremism and terrorism. Moreover, despite the planned drawdown, there would be continuing need for close cooperation between the two countries, especially in Afghanistan. Our key issues of mutual concern include terrorism, the United Nations reform, international economic cooperation, and environment. Pakistan appreciates the constructive role the US has historically played in diffusing tensions between Pakistan and India. With its growing influence in India, the US now has the capacity to do more to help the two sides resolve their core disputes, including Kashmir, and in promoting a culture of cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is, however, the matter of drone strikes, which have deeply disturbed and agitated our people. In my first statement to the Parliament, I had reiterated our strong commitment to ensuring an end to the drone attacks. More recently, our political parties in a national conference had declared that the use of drones is not only a continued violation of our territorial integrity, but also detrimental to our resolve and efforts at eliminating terrorism from our country. This issue has become a major irritant in our bilateral relationship as well. I would therefore stress the need for an end to drone attacks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my endeavor to approach this important relationship with an open and fresh mind, leaving behind the baggage of trust deficit and mutual suspicions. Instead, cooperation in key areas including trade, investment, energy, technology, education, and agriculture under the rubric of strategic dialogue should be the main plank of our partnership. As large democracies, there should be greater interaction between our two countries, not only at the parliamentary level, but through exchange of businessmen, students, opinion makers, and tourism, as these would help remove many of our misperceptions. Moreover, the traditionally strong ties at the military level should be reinvigorated. The vibrant community of Pakistani Americans is playing an important role in bringing our two nations closer. I am thankful to them as they constitute a permanent link between our two countries that can and should play an important role in eliminating the negative perceptions. Ladies and gentlemen, as a responsible nuclear power and a major developing country, Pakistan is destined to play a key role in regional stability and world peace and security. Pakistan remains fully alive to protecting its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence. Without engaging in an arms race, Pakistan will maintain credible minimum deterrence to ensure regional security and stability. We would nevertheless consistently pursue the goals of disarmament on a non-discriminatory basis. It is our hope that the United States would follow an even-handed and non-discriminatory approach in fields like civil nuclear cooperation. Ladies and gentlemen, as you would be aware, Pakistan is a country blessed with enormous human and material resources. It is strategically located at the crossroads of the vast regions of South and East Asia on one side and Central Asia and West Asia on the other. Pakistan is a natural land bridge connecting these two vast regions and thus has the potential of becoming a hub of transit and trade among these regions. With a vibrant civil society, a critical media, and independent judiciary, a huge reservoir of educated young population, and the phenomenal expansion of IT network, Pakistan is emerging as a modern, knowledge-based society. With a fast developing physical infrastructure, abundant skilled labor, and attractive investment incentives, Pakistan is poised to attract its due share from the process of globalization. The historic democratic transition after the May 11 elections have been hailed by international community. It has also instilled confidence among the investor community within the country and abroad. I avail myself of this opportunity to invite the United States private sector to join us in efforts for sustained economic growth and development. The revival of the economy is the key to progress across the entire spectrum of challenges that we are facing today, from terrorism and extremism to development of our social sector. It is also an essential prerequisite for strengthening democracy and the rule of law. This is what we've learned from our own experience. And this is what I recall President Franklin Roosevelt emphasizing in one of his speeches. True individual freedom cannot exist without economic security and independence. People who are hungry and out of job are the stuff of which dictatorships are made. Ladies and gentlemen, I am aware of the fact that the driving motivation of the founding fathers of this great nation was their intense desire to live in a country where religious freedom and economic opportunities would be available to all. Our founding fathers, too, sought to establish a homeland with similar goals. There is therefore a national affinity between our peoples, the overwhelming majority of whom believe in the same just and merciful God, which reminds me of Jesus Christ's Sermon on the Mount when he had declared, "Blessed are the peacemakers." Some 6 centuries later, when the Holy Quran was revealed to Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, we were reminded of the eternal truth. We made you into nations and tribes so that you may know each other. Verily, the most honored of you in the sight of God is he who is most righteous of you. Let us therefore endeavor, ladies and gentlemen, to know each other better so that we can all make our modest contribution to making the world a better place. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Again, Prime Minister, it is a real honor for us to have you with us here today. We thank you for your thoughtful remarks. I just have 2 or 3 questions that I thought we might use as an opening for a further conversation and elaboration on some of the points you made in your address. You are seen widely as someone who prioritizes the revival of the Pakistani economy as a way to the country's success and to peace. How challenging is this task? And do you feel you've managed to put the economy on a path to sustain progress, even though you've only been in office for 4 months? Could you talk a little bit about your hopes for the Pakistani economy?
We are facing huge challenges in Pakistan, as I just now mentioned in my address. And let me tell you, economy is also one of those huge challenges that we are confronted with. And our party, while in the 1990s, when we were, of course, in office, came out with very bold economic reforms that became very popular in the country. And we very successfully implemented those reforms in the 1990s. which also included privatization, denationalization of the state-owned enterprises, which were nationalized by Mr. Bhutto in 1971. And we did manage to privatize and denationalize banks, insurance companies, and other state-owned enterprises very successfully. And those institutions were running into losses, and the losses were being picked up by the government, are now making huge profits and paying tax to the exchequer to the worth billions of rupees in Pakistan today. So economy is very badly affected by the scourge of terrorism that we've been facing in Pakistan. As I just mentioned, it has taken more than 40,000 lives in Pakistan. And we have to put the economy right. Of course, today, energy is one of our biggest problems. It has not been addressed by the successive governments in Pakistan, the previous governments. So this is one of the major issues that are being which is being dealt with by this government. I hope that the international community will certainly support us in dealing with our economy, not in terms of any aid, but I believe that a lot of other things can be done, that they open, especially the United States of America, open their doors to promote our trade here in America. And then we are struggling hard to deal with the law and order situation, which of course I just mentioned, including the terrorism. And once we're able to effectively deal with it, I believe that the economy will be booming. In fact, you see, both are interdependent. You see, if you want to have a conducive investment climate in the country, you've got to have a good law and order situation in the country. And to have a good law and order situation in the country, you must address the issue of poverty, you must address the issue of unemployment. So both are, you see, very closely linked with each other. So we are dealing with this issue. These are our top priorities.
Prime Minister, you mentioned energy, and nothing seems to have hurt the Pakistani economy more in the last few years than the energy crisis. Do you agree with that assessment? And could you tell us a little bit about what are your plans for the energy sector, since it is so important for the economic growth that you've talked about?
This is an issue which has been there for the last several years, has not been addressed by the previous government, the government before that, and we've had outages for several hours in a day. In most of the areas of Pakistan, we've been able to fix this problem to some extent, I would say to a small extent, by paying off the circular debt to the tune of 500 billion rupees immediately after coming into office. I think that was a very big decision and a very big step that the government of Pakistan, our government, took to solve this problem, or to at least pay off the debts. And now, of course, Pakistan, the power system in Pakistan, you see, there are a lot of thefts that are there in the system, which we are trying to overcome, and a lot of, you see, under capacity. The plants are running under capacity which are being addressed, and inefficiency, of course, has crept into our system. We are trying to address that as well. But we've come out with a very comprehensive power policy, which provides ways and means to the investor to come and invest in Pakistan. And also we've announced an upfront tariff to all those investors so that they don't have to waste their time in negotiating with the government. It's a very transparent system that we have now introduced in Pakistan. And now Pakistan has tremendous potential in 3 different sectors in the overall energy and power sector. One is, of course, the hydro generation. Pakistan has a capacity to produce more than 100,000 megawatts in this sector alone. And the government is undertaking 3 major projects like, I would just name them for you. One is Bhasha, the other one is Bunji, the third one is, what is the name? Dasu. These 3 will produce about 15,000 megawatts, 15,000 megawatts of 16,000 megawatts of electricity. And then we also have set up an energy park in Karachi, near Karachi, which will produce about 6,600 megawatts. So I think this will not only overcome the gap in the supply and demand that we are facing today, but will also be able to cater for the future requirements in energy. And since this is a sector which provides very quick returns to the investor, I would like to welcome the American investors from all over the world to come in and take a look in Pakistan and invest in this sector. And the government of Pakistan does provide and will make sure that the principal and as well as the profits are fully repatriated.
In your address, you spoke very passionately about improving Pakistan's relations with India. How do you plan?
That is my favorite subject, you see.
Well, it is a difficult subject, and it is not without controversy. Can you say a little bit about what is your vision? How could they improve the relationship? And particularly about Kashmir and whether there is a formula for bringing peace to Kashmir.
You see, my government paved the way in 1990s and laid the foundation for building better relations with India. And Mr. Vajpayee was very kind to undertake first ever state visit to Pakistan in 1998. This was soon after the nuclear detonations by India and then subsequently followed by Pakistan. And that was a very successful visit. Both of us sat across the table, decided that we will resolve all our outstanding issues through negotiations, through peaceful means, and through talks. I think that was a major breakthrough, and also Kashmir was mentioned very categorically in that agreement and the treaty that we both signed. I was very pleasantly surprised by the statement of Mr. Vajpayee in Lahore that Mr. Nawaz Sharif, let us declare 1999 as the year of a resolution of all problems that exist between Pakistan and India, including the issue of Kashmir. I was pleasantly surprised to hear that. And then we both started working for it. We established back channels. Anyway, the whole process was derailed by Mr. Musharraf, who toppled our government, unconstitutionally, and imposed martial law in the country. And then you know what he did to the country. He even fired the judges, sent them home, house arrested them. And we are the ones who actually then had to struggle for the reinstatement of all those judges who were unconstitutionally fired and thrown out of office by Mr. Musharraf. Anyway, what the subject that I was discussing, that we would like to pick up the threads from where we left off in 1999 and then move forward. I had a good meeting with Mr. Manmohan Singh in New York last month, and we discussed all these issues. You see, whenever we want to move forward, something happens, and then the process again gets a serious setback. For example, when we were about to meet in New York, just weeks and days before that meeting, there were clashes on the line of control, people getting killed from both sides, our side, their side. And then we also have been in a very unfortunate arms race since the partition for almost about 66 years. So we've wasted all the resources. I just mentioned this in my speech also. I believe that we need to get out of this situation. And I believe very strongly that both countries, of course, will have to sit down together. And if we sit down together, if we seriously address these issues, I don't think we will face any problem in addressing these and solving these issues. Kashmir, of course, is a very difficult issue and very difficult to resolve. But I think by sitting and talking, we will be able to find some way of resolving that too, because that is a flashpoint in not only in the region, but in the whole world. And then any solution which can come about will not be able to come about unless and until the people of all three sides put their endorsement to this, the people of India, people of Pakistan, and the people of Kashmir. And I believe that by talking we can, and then of course we want to enhance our trade with India, our economic relations with India, and there is so much that we can do together by enhancing our trade and economic ties with each other.
Mr. Prime Minister, thank you very much. We are out of time. Unfortunately, the Prime Minister has a schedule to keep. I want to thank him for being here. Thank you for being here, and invite Jim Marshall to the stage again for a brief presentation.
Thank you very much.
Just a picture from your visit.
Very efficient.
We try to be. Thank you all. If you would remain seated while the official party leaves. And thank you all.
Very fun. Thank you. All the best to you. Thank you.